A beautiful, beautiful, looks like spring kind of day that feels not quite like spring yet. So it's good to have you with us here in Fellowship Hall, and it's good to have you joining us from the comfort of your homes, wherever you may be this morning. My name is Kent McCusick. I'm the minister serving this fellowship. My pronouns are he and him, and it is so good to be with you this morning. Our board welcome this morning is by Sarah Carlson. Sarah.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Sarah Carlson and I serve on your fellowship board of directors. I want to thank you all for being here today and extend a special welcome to any visitors. Please stay on after the service if you are virtually, where we'll have coffee hour and you can introduce yourself if you're comfortable and join in the conversation with kindred spirits. If you would like more information about the fellowship, please sign our virtual guest book at uufa.org/guestbook. The new CDC COVID-19 community guidelines currently rate Story County in the low green level, which means that the fellowship has again reopened to in-person gathering. Masks are still required, and for now, we're not singing or serving coffee and refreshments. Childcare is also currently not available. In line with these guidelines, we look forward to seeing you at the fellowship or on Zoom if you prefer. We greatly appreciate all you continue to do in keeping our whole community healthy and safe. Please continue to wear your masks. Stay home if you do not feel well, and be mindful of others' comfort in social distancing. Be vaccinated and get those boosters when appropriate. These measures have kept our beloved community safe, and now we're glad to be together again. So on behalf of this caring, nurturing congregation, I welcome each and every one of you to this sacred space. Here we invite you into an experience of transformation, hope, renewal, and connections, which may inspire you to understand life in new ways. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah. Each week, we begin our service with the ringing of our chime 3 times. Once to wake the chime, once to open our minds, and once to open our hearts.
In the world of the driven, let us be drawn in. Let your love be a given, let us be drawn in. To imagine, to dream, to create, to redeem, for the sake of the living, let us be drawn in.
Our chalice lighting this morning is by Nancy Ladd McDonald. For those who tend the vineyards, for those who labor in the fields of liberal idealism, for the ones who work the plows of this fertile soil, for the ones to whom blessings are not yet extended in this whole new world we are building together, for the ones who went before us and the ones who are still waiting to be included in the dream. I light this little flame, and I am both grateful for and daunted by the work that lies ahead. This morning, I would like to share with you a special message from Reverend Lajos, the minister of our partner church in Transylvania, Romania, which borders the Ukraine. Dear friends, here things go not very well. We face the horror of war every day, even if it is not really in our country, but it is in our neighborhood. Many families, mostly women and children, are escaping from Ukraine and try to find shelter in different countries, in Romania too. We try to help them, so we are collecting money, food, and other things for them and try to organize their accommodation and food. They have mostly gone till now to bigger cities, but as cities are fulfilled, they start to come to smaller towns too. So we started to be prepared to welcome them in our places, planning to give them accommodation, food, and help them to find the chance to go back after war, to go further in Europe. Our request would be to you to help us in fundraising for this aim. Our homes, common places are open to those who are in need, and we will help as we can, but any other help would be useful. The situation is getting harder and harder because the prices of food and energy went up to the sky because of the crisis. It happens, for now rarely, but who knows, that there is no fuel in the station or its price became almost double during the night. The prices of food and other materials went up. In such a situation, we hardly can run our elderly program, and on top of this, we have to prepare to accept refugees. We pray for peace. Please be with us in this hard time. Best wishes from Ceyatfalva and Torratfalva. Love, Lajos. So if you have felt the urge to offer a hand to those in need, giving to the partner church after the service will channel that money to help feed and house refugees in Romania. Thank you. The prelude this morning. At a time when their countries are at war, two pianists played a Mozart duet. Sasha Grignac was born in Kiev, Ukraine, and Roman Soskyavkov in Siberia. As their countries are in conflict and the human tragedies unfold, the pair, who have never played together before, wanted to find togetherness in music. At a grand piano, they played Mozart's Andante with 5 variations in G for 4 hands. This footage was taken during a rehearsal ahead of the fundraising concert in support of humanitarian work. As Belarusian pianist Maya Bergelina said, "When words fail, there is music left. Music unites us." Could you silence your phone, please?
Man, somebody's out in the coat area, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. Our time for all ages this morning, and thank you. Our time for all ages this morning is The Hungry Coat by Leah Morris.
Let me tell you about The Hungry Coat. Mullah Nasruddin was a wise, scholarly theologian. He was also a hard-working, industrious farmer. And one day, during the Feast of Ramadan, he was working hard on his farm. As the sun was beginning to set, his stomach was beginning to grumble, and his mind was already somewhat in the future, because one of the wealthiest members of his community had invited everyone to come and gather for a feast to break the fast on this evening. Mullah Nasruddin could already almost taste the figs, the chicken, the beef, the lentils, all of the good and delicious things that would be spread on that table for everyone to share and enjoy. The only problem was that he had worked so long and so hard that it was almost time to gather for the feast already. If he went home to wash himself and change his clothes, he'd be late. So he decided he would go directly from working in the fields to the feast. When he arrived at the door, a servant answered and immediately noticed his dirty, tattered, worn work clothes. They also recognized his face and they let him in, but with some reluctance and certainly without a word of welcome. Mullah Nasruddin arrived at the feast, at the table where all the other members of the community were gathered, and they likewise looked him over scornfully, questioning. None of them issued a welcome, a hello. No one moved aside to make space for him at the table. They noticed his clothes, and they continued their conversations. So he grabbed a plate and he reached between people to choose the food that he wanted and the things that he had been so excited about eating. There were the figs and the chicken and the beef and the lentils that he had been counting on all day. But somehow, once he had his food, his appetite was gone. But being a wise and scholarly man, he put his plate down in the corner and went home. He washed himself. He dressed, and he put on his finest coat, a coat with many pockets, many colors made of silk, one that the members of the community had commented on before. And indeed, when he returned, the servant opened the door and looked favorably upon his coat and said, "My, Mullah Nasruddin, you're looking fine this evening. We're glad that you could join us. Please come in." When Mullah Nasruddin came to the table in his clean and fancy dress, well, a few people moved aside and invited him to sit next to them and asked how his day had been and offered him some of the delicious foods that were spread on the table. Well, this time, the mullah saw the figs and put one into his pocket and said, "Eat, coat, eat, enjoy." And he reached out for some nuts and he put those into another pocket and said, "Eat, coat, eat." He wasn't so sure about putting chicken or beef in his coat and maybe lentils either, but there were some dates and he put those into his coat's pocket and said, "Eat, coat, enjoy, enjoy the meal. Finally, the host of the feast had watched enough and silenced all the conversation and addressed the mullah directly. Mullah Nasruddin, lovely that you could be with us this evening. Why are you putting food into your coat pockets? And the mullah replied, yes, thank you so much for the kind and generous invitation. I am merely feeding my coat because I realized that when I came before in my dirty work clothes, that I was not really welcome at this table. But when I returned in my fine clothing, in my fancy coat, that I was suddenly seen. And that helped me understand that it is not I who am welcome at this feast, but my coat. This story challenges us. When we state an intention to open our communities, our homes, our hearts, our lives, to widen our circles, that we need to search ourselves and be aware of the places where we might be keeping others out, that we get to choose to welcome in those who others might turn away, and in fact, to be radical in our acceptance. This story inspired this song. Who is my neighbor and who is my friend? Who do I welcome to step right on in? Who do I comfort with all of my love? May it be said of me that the answer is everyone. Let 'em in, let 'em in. The hungry and the ragged who've been tossed off by the wind. Let 'em in, let 'em in. Watch and see what goodness can begin. When am I open? When am I kind? When am I willing to share what's on my mind? When do I listen, even if I don't agree? May you find it's every time, that's who I strive to be. Let 'em in, let 'em in. Different and peculiar might become a trusted friend. Let 'em in, let 'em in. Watch and see what newness can begin. Let 'em in, let 'em in. Open up your heart and let 'em in.
Our offertory recipient for March through May is the Community Academy Micro School. This new endeavor takes a different approach to education, engaging students in nature, relationships, and involvement in our community. UUFA members Mike and Andy Todd are at the center of the Micro School's founding. Let's hear a few words from Mike this morning.
We call this thing we're creating a micro school, right? It's going to be a smaller space. It's much more nimble to change as we see and students see the need for change. And we're really an R&D. We're going to be located out at ISU Research Park, and we're really R&D for education. We are in it, and the kids are part of it, and the families are part of it, you know, and we are going to continue to change what we do until every student and every staff member are excited and beating down the doors to get to school every day.
More information on the Community Academy Microschool is available at their website, thecommunityacademy.org, TCM Microschool. All gifts received by the Academy during March through May will be fully matched by Larry and Sue Kerson. You can make a gift by visiting our website, uufames.org/give, or you can mail a check made out to the fellowship with a memo of TCA. Or if you're here in person today, you can leave your offering in the basket by your door on your way out. As always, thank you for your generosity. I don't normally introduce interludes, but this is a special one this morning. Singing by Amelia, a 7-year-old from a bomb shelter in Ukraine, as she sings Let It Go.
Не открывай, храни секрет, будь хорошей девочкой для всех. Закрой все чувства на замок, навечно отпусти и забудь, что прошло уже не вернуть. Отпусти и забудь, новый день он кажет путь. Не боюсь ничего уже, пусть бы шум ничто, холод всегда мне был по душе, а я иду все выше, на ледяную власть, и страха не вернувшись, меня уж не догнать. Пора узнать, что я могу, на помощь призову к себе. Во льдах навечно отпусти и забудь, что прошло уже не вернуть. Отпусти и забудь, новый день он кажет путь.
The Gates of Hope by Victoria Safford. Our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, not the stalwart, boring gates of common sense, nor the strident gates of self-righteousness, which creak on shrill and angry hinges. People cannot hear us there. They cannot pass through. Nor the cheerful, flimsy garden gate of everything's going to be all right, but a different, sometimes lonely place, the place of truth-telling about your own soul, first of all, and its condition. The place of resistance and defiance, the piece of ground from which you see the world, both as it is and as it could be, as it will be. The place from which you glimpse not only struggle, but the joy of struggle. And we stand there, beckoning and calling, telling people what we are seeing, asking people what they see.
Each week, we take time in our service to share milestones, significant things that are happening in our lives that bring us joy or challenge or gratitude. In this multi-platform environment, there are two parts to this. The first part, we invite people here in Fellowship Hall, if you have a milestone to share, to please come to the front microphone, introduce yourself, and share your milestone. Then we need to make a transition so that people at home can share milestones too, if they wish to as well. So people at home, please wait until you see in the chat that we're ready for you, because it turns off this mic and you won't be able to hear me. So we'll start with milestones in Fellowship Hall. This is our time of sharing. I would offer a candle this morning for our congregational administrator, Bradley, whose mother died earlier this week.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here in person. I'm Molly Helmers, and this candle I'd like to light is for my colleague Svetlana Zabarska, who is Ukrainian, and she has been in the United States for 20 years, but has family back home, including her in-laws, her brother, and a number of friends that she attended school with. And I know she says she feels more Ukrainian than ever right now, even though she has been away from the country for many years. She is doing a radio show on KHOI on Fridays from noon to 12:30, where she's connecting with people who are back in Ukraine and trying to speak to them, and also giving her perspective on events. So if that's something you're interested in, I'm sure she would be glad to have listeners and support financially and just in your hearts. Thank you.
As we make the transition to open the platform to our friends at home, I invite you into a time of deep breathing and silence.
Are you ready?
Yes, Ronnie, go ahead.
Okay. I want to light a virtual candle for myself. Today is my birthday, and it's not one that ends with a 0, but as I've said to other people, when you get to be my age, every birthday is a milestone. Thank you.
We light one candle, the last candle today, for all those milestones that are unspoken, that are held silently in our hearts and mind. Whatever brought you here today, whatever you carry, whether joyful or painful, whether in grief or in joy, know that in this community of love, no one ever needs to make the journey alone. Let's be together in a moment of silence.
This reading is from Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. It's important to say what hope is not. It's not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of the tremendous suffering and tremendous destruction. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, ones that invite or demand that we act. It's not a sunny, everything is getting better narrative, though it may be a counter to the everything is getting worse narrative. Patricia Cullors, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matters, early on described the movement's mission as to provide hope and inspiration for collective action to build collective power, to achieve collective transformation, rooted in grief and rage, but pointed towards vision and dreams. It's a statement that acknowledges that grief and hope coexist. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know all what will happen, and that the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes. You alone, or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. It's the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact are not things we can know beforehand. We may not, in fact, know them afterward either, but they matter all the same. And history is full of people whose influence was most powerful after they were gone.
Our special music this morning is by Jason Robert Brown. It's called Hope, performed by Natasha Yvette Williams.
I come to sing a song about hope. I'm not inspired much right now, but even so, I came out here to sing a song, so here I go. I guess I think that if I tinker long enough, one might appear. And look, it's here. One verse is done. The work's begun. Come to sing a song about hope. In spite of everything ridiculous and sad, though I'm beyond belief depressed, confused, and mad, I got dressed. I underestimated how much that would take. I didn't break until right now. I sing of hope and don't know how. So maybe I should substitute strength, because I'm strong enough. I got lots of things I didn't think I could, and so did you. I know that's true. And so I sing a song about hope. Though I can't guarantee there's something real behind it, I have to try to show my children I can find it. And so today, when life seems crazy and impossible to bear, it must be there. Fear never wins. I sing of hope. See, I said hope. The work begins.
In writing After the Good News, the Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd invites us to renew our faith by broadening our engagement with Unitarian Universalism. She invites us to choose to live in the state of creative tension, where, as Rebecca Solnit observed, grief and rage point us towards vision and dreams. In this state of creative tension, grief and hope can coexist. Like Reverend MacDonald Ladd, I love Unitarian Universalism. And yet we both have struggled with the disquieting utopian sentiment in the theological foundations, sense of exceptionalism, and an unbridled optimism that we have always been pointed in the right direction. In Unitarian Universalism, there is a long history of members having the privilege to quickly return to comfort after challenging times. Blind optimism appealed for generations to the primary racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic location of leaders and participants of this faith. Ladd writes, "We proclaimed the inherent worth and dignity of every single human being, but we learned and served in institutions that put the dignity, power, possibility, and perspectives of some very self-assured white people at the center. For much of the past 100 years, even through wars, devastation, and the insidious persistence of systemic racism, modernist religious liberals in Eurocentric churches have preached about our near unlimited capacity to fix just about everything that is broken. We have believed in ourselves so completely that the good news has become a good word about our own capacity to heal things, leaving little room for honest atonement of our own complicity in brokenness." Historically, the majority of Unitarian Universalists have lived fundamentally comfortable lives and have worked through deeply troubling times and issues, moving through tragedy with the assurance of comfort. Framed by white people and presented to white people, which is jarring for those who live with no such expectation of safety or privilege. Ladd writes, "It is difficult to preach that all things shall grow into harmony with the divine when things seem to fall apart all around us. It is difficult to proclaim that this beautiful harmony will be created by the church itself when the church remains centered on the experiences and expectations of people who have spent far too long at the center of power." She encourages us to witness, name, and let go of our self-assurance, liberal optimism, an attachment to respectability, and the centering of whiteness by being faithful and courageous in the transformative work of dismantling white supremacy and decentering whiteness in our institutions. This process is fueled by resilience, truth-telling, and humble courage. To do this, we need to begin right where we are, every day. Now, Nancy MacDonald Ladd is a wonderful storyteller. Her beginning and early attraction to this liberal progressive faith started in the little southern Indiana town of New Harmony. Have any of you ever been to New Harmony? New Harmony was the site of two utopian societies in 1814 and 1827. This book that she wrote, After the Good News, please read it. This sermon could be about 10 hours long, but I thought I'd be kind today. It's really a good read. I think it's an important read. It's from 2019. But it's worth reading alone for the stories of the bold and flawed utopian visions of shared property, intellectual advancement, educational reform, and the issues that resulted in the failure of both of these utopian societies. She starts there because the conditions that compromised those utopian visions are similar to the foundational forces that have hindered the development of liberal religious communities today, including Unitarian Universalism. These issues include a profound, naive, and overly optimistic faith in the human capacity to create unending progress for those in power. A broad and universalist faith constrained by a small circle of elite, largely male, and overwhelmingly white intellectuals, and an inability or refusal of the privileged to acknowledge and atone for the ways in which they have benefited from the oppression of others. The costs included the lives and livelihoods of Native people, slaves, immigrant laborers, and middle-class workers. Ladd observes, where the great reformers of the former age failed, so do we. Where they sinned in the hubris of their vision, so do we. Where the elites among them refused to push their ideals far enough to feel the pinch of discomfort, so do we as religious liberals continue to refuse the discomfort of the anti-oppressive vision that calls us forward." End quote. We have the opportunity to learn from our forebears and from our own failures. But we have the choice to make new choices that respond to brokenness and live in the creative tension of grief and hope. The next interlude is by Ilya Bondarenko, who filmed himself in a basement shelter in Kiev. He's playing an old Ukrainian folk song called Verbovaya Doshkenka. He was contacted by violinist Karenza Peacock, who reached out to 94 violinists in 29 countries to accompany him in harmony. He reportedly had to film himself between explosions. This is his music, joined by other violinists from all over the world. The work we have committed to doing in response to adopting the eighth principle offers the balance of hope in a time of grief and rage in response to the brokenness of the world and our own brokenness. We have the ability to choose actions that will make a difference, that have the capacity to transform us and our faith in the midst of creative tension, in the midst of grief and hope. Reverend Ladd believes that the choices we make individually and collectively are conditioned by the relationships that define us. Relationships between bodies, between cultures, and between ourselves and the divine. The power of our choices can contribute to a mutuality with those who have been and continue to be marginalized and oppressed. And by doing so, the future is more survivable for all. But it is also important to remember that the power of our choices can also cause deep harm. Nancy MacDonald Ladd believes that if liberal religion can find the way to successfully step into a future of engaged anti-oppressive work, we will be called to serve not only because others are broken or the system is broken, but because, as the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, Bryan Stevenson says, I am broken too. Stevenson shared why he has dedicated his life to justice work. He said, I do what I do because I'm broken too. And the truth is that if you get proximate, if you change narratives, if you are required to stay hopeful, if you do uncomfortable things, it will break you. But I also learned that there is power in brokenness. It is the power among us who can teach us the way compassion works. It is the broken who understand the power of mercy. It is the broken who understand the power of justice. It is the broken who yearn for redemption. It is the broken who yearn for reconciliation. It is the broken who need to teach us how we love despite our brokenness. And it's the brokenness that I realize that I'm not just fighting for the condemned, I'm fighting for myself. Bryan Stevenson. I am broken too. We are broken too. Through the years, I have regularly observed to you that Unitarian Universalism is not a confessional faith. The liturgical freedom we experience by professing to live into the principles of our faith does not have a liturgical or spiritual element of repentance. In celebrating life every Sunday, Ladd suggests that we have forgotten how to authentically examine life and come to terms with our shortcomings. She writes, when a mirror is held up to the mostly white, mostly middle class, mostly comfortable people in our congregations, it is often held in the hand by a person of color. And since we do not know how to authentically atone, People of privilege in the liberal church respond to this living reflection with defensiveness. I want to say that sentence one more time, because I've been in that place of feeling defensive, and I think we all have. And since we do not know how to authentically atone, people of privilege in the liberal church respond to this living reflection with defensiveness. Atonement is a way of making amends for wrongdoing, for choices that have caused harm. The Jewish tradition, one of the sources of our faith, celebrate the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, which calls for people to meaningfully acknowledge any harm they have done whenever possible, to repair what is broken and begin again with a different heart. Rabbi Lawrence Kushner writes that in the time of atonement, we go down into ourselves with a flashlight, looking for the evil we have intended or done, not to excise it as if it were some alien growth, but rather to discover the holy spark within it. The holy spark of acknowledgement and discovery can be an act of vulnerability that transforms us through truth-telling, grace, and humility. Many of you remember Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs, former minister of Unity Church, Unitarian in St. Paul, who wrote hymn number 1037 in the Teal hymnal, We Begin Again in Love, as a musical act of atonement. And while inspired by the Jewish tradition, the piece could stand as a spiritual ritual for Unitarian Universalists throughout the year. We're going to hear that. And for those of you at home, I invite you to sing the response as we listen to the song. And although we're not singing in Fellowship Hall, I invite you and those of you at home to repeat after me this refrain of atonement, which is repeated throughout the piece. We forgive ourselves and each other. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. I invite you to quietly engage in this time of atonement. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again
for falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
May we remember the power of brokenness as we live into the 8 principles of Unitarian Universalism and Brian Stevenson's 4 ways to fight injustice. Get proximate, get closer to the issues, change the narrative, find the connections between the ills of our past and their connections to today. Fight against hopelessness. Get uncomfortable. There is no path to justice that is convenient and comfortable. May we live into the hope that demands or invites that we act, because what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact are not things that we can know beforehand. May we begin again in love. Amen, and blessed be. The closing song, What Will You Make? By Leah.
At the start of any given day, there is mystery available. There is a game waiting for an open heart to say yes. Here I am, I'll play. And if we're smart, we'll listen to the way, and all the misery that held us down, we'll let it fade. Let it be outshined by a simple spark of a life that's waiting to be made. It's waiting to be made. What will you make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? What will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping? Or will you awaken and decide what you will make? At the start of any given day, there is history and poetry. There is a play, but you're not in the audience. You are the star. So get out there and say what you made. What will you make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see?
What will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide just what you will make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? And what will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide what you make?
I extinguish the chalice this morning with the words of the Reverend Scott Taylor. Go with faith, not the kind that is called to move mountains, but the quieter sort that calls us to take the first step, even when the whole staircase sits beyond our view. And as we stride toward the unseen, may we notice that the way unfolds only as we risk walking it, and may we remember and trust that none of these steps are ones that we take alone. Thank you for joining us this morning in Fellowship Hall and from home. And thank you for your generosity in supporting the Community Academy and also other initiatives close to our hearts, including our partner church and Black Lives Matter. This morning, instead of breakout rooms, we will stay, for those of you at home, in our large one room. And if you in Fellowship Hall would like to visit with the people at home, we have the monitors set up out in the fireside room where you can go and talk to your friends who are joining us from home and be in conversation once you've had some conversation with each other here, because it is so good to see each other in person. And brace yourself. It won't be long before the kitchen is open again. Coffee. Have a great week.